from Democratic Congressman James Clyburn of South Carolina. He's the third-ranking Democrat in the House of Representatives. Congressman, thanks so much for joining us. And what do you think? I just want to get your immediate reaction to these CEOs, these other business leaders bolting from these two councils because of the president's statements or lack of statements.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Wolf. I think what these CEOs are doing or demonstrating what this country is all about. I congratulate them on stepping aside from the charade. Ken Frazier, just a great friend, and I thank him so much for leading the charge on this. What we see now is a tremendous credibility gap, a morality gap that is developed in this country, and the business community is stepping up to do its part to fill that gap. Now it's time for the United States Congress to step in. Someone said earlier on your show that the president cannot fire the Congress. That is correct. And the Congress needs to demonstrate that we are, in fact, a co-equal branch of government. And I think that it's time for the Speaker of the House, the leader of the House, the Democratic leader, Nancy Pelosi, and for both Senator Schumer and Senator McConnell to bring together their leadership teams, and let's begin to put together an approach to governance that will bring people together, that will pass legislation that will move this country forward and pass it in a bipartisan way. Get 145 House members on the Republican side, 145 Democrats, and let's get the 290 votes that are necessary to have a veto-proof piece of legislation, pass it, send it to the president. If he doesn't sign it, let's override the veto and let's go forward. Same thing in the Senate. 35 senators on either side will pass legislation. We've got to bring this country together. And I think that when you have a moral crisis in the White House, and that's what we've got, it's time for us in the Congress as a co-equal branch to step into the gap and bring this country together. We can do it. We did it back in 2008. We did bipartisan legislation to bring this country back from the brink of economic disaster. We are now approaching the brink of what I would call a morality disaster, a moral disaster in this country. I think the Congress can serve that same purpose here today. And so I'm calling upon the leadership of the House and the Senate in a bipartisan way to let's do what's necessary to demonstrate who and what we are, and let's move this country forward in a bipartisan and in a multiracial way.
Well, let me ask you, Congressman, because you've been a leader in the civil rights movement in our country for a long time, going way, way back. Give us a little sense of history right now when you saw those marchers with torches screaming out racist, anti-Semitic slurs, and you heard them say, "Jews will not replace us. Jews will not replace us." Then they screamed out, "You will not replace us. You will not replace us," referring to African Americans. When they uttered the slogan, blood and soil, a clear statement that we heard Nazis speak out in the 30s in Germany. What was your reaction as someone who has worked so hard in this area of civil rights all of these years?
Well, you know, I've been saying to people for a long time, my members in Congressional Black Caucus colleagues will tell you, I've been saying to them that we are approaching the place where we've been before. I was around in the 60s, as you said, and I remember some of the sloganeering, and I remember what some of the political leaders had to say. That was a different day and a different time. We remember from our studies what happened in the 1930s in Germany. I told a business group down at Hilton Head several weeks before the election that what I saw coming was a replay of what happened in Nazi Germany. The fact of the matter is, Hitler was elected as Chancellor of Germany. He did not become a dictator until later, when people began to be influenced by his foolishness. We just elected a president, and he's got a lot of foolishness going on. And I'm afraid that too many people are being influenced by that foolishness. And so what we've got to do now is step up and say we are not going to allow any one person to misuse an election and to abuse the process and turn this country back on its head. We are going to move forward. I think the Congress needs to sit in, step in and do what's necessary to move us forward. We've got to raise this debt ceiling so the full faith and credit of the United States will not be called into question. Let's do it in a bipartisan way. I don't care whether or not it's a clean bill or a bill with other stuff hanging on it, so long as it's bipartisan. Let's do what is necessary to reform our tax code. Do that in a bipartisan way. Do the same thing for fixing the Affordable Care Act. There are problems with the Affordable Care Act. We all know it. Just like there were problems with the Civil Rights Act of 1964. But we came back and fixed it in 65, and again in 68, and again in 72. That's what we need to do now, is move forward and fix the Affordable Care Act, and then let's do a bipartisan infrastructure bill that will do more than build roads and bridges. Let's have water and sewage going into communities that need them, and let's target resources into communities of need, and let's have broadband deployment so our kids can get the education that they need. The House of Representatives and the Senate need to step into the gap, and let's do what is necessary to move our country forward, because this president has marginalized himself in such a way he is never going to be able to provide any moral leadership, which is what is needed from any president in order to move an agenda.
Very strong words from Congressman James Clyburn, who I pointed out goes way back in the civil rights movement to the 60s. Congressman, thanks so much for joining us.
Well, thank you so much.